whatever you are as a person and whatever you're going to be, if you play this game and it's kind of a microcosm. I've always been able to live my life in positivity.
1985, Villanova shocks the world by upsetting Georgetown.
1996, Princeton Tigers upsets UCLA Bruins.
In 1997, Coppin State upsets South Carolina.
2018, the first ever number 16 seed UMBC upsets number 1 University of Virginia.
Everyone loves a great underdog story, the huge upsets, David beating Goliath. But what happens when there are no upsets? When the only people you get to see and hear from are famous people, the superstars, the head coaches, the celebrities. Are their stories more important? Do they matter more? Everyone puts in the same work, the same time, the same sweat. So who hears their stories? From the walk-ons, the assistant coaches, the role players, the 10th man off the bench. Everyone has a story and everyone has a voice. And on this podcast, you will meet these people, you will hear their stories in their own voices.
This is UndeRAYted.
Welcome to UndeRAYted. I am your host, Ray Hutter, along with my co-host, the one and only, still killing it, still crushing it, at age 49, looking good, Mr. David Capers. Cape, how are you today?
I'm feeling good today. Feeling good and energized, brother.
We got a special guest in that.
We do.
Long time coming, a fellow hoopster. Always looking to get a run in with us. We appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Let me introduce you to Mr. Marcus Whitaker, Esquire, sports agent, lefty sharpshooter from Fairleigh Dickinson University from way back when.
2000, 2004. You're already aging me, man.
Yeah, well, listen, I'm the oldest one at the table, so, I always like to make sure, everybody's respectful to me. So.
You're young at heart, right? You're young at heart.
Exactly. But, Marcus, thank you, man. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's always good to, see you guys in a different setting as it's right trying to beat you. On those Saturday mornings.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. It's funny because the first time I told you the story, the first time I ever saw you, you came into the gym and I was like, all right, I saw him warm up a little bit. He's a little rusty. So I was like, all right, I'll guard him. About 4 weeks later, I was like, I never want to guard this dude again. He even lit me up with that lefty jump shot. So I was like, all right, lesson learned. But Vargas, welcome. And so I think you know this already, because you're a big follower of this program as we're trying to grow this.
Yeah.
But UndeRAYted really is a podcast about giving people that maybe never got a chance to be interviewed, never got the limelight, but deserved it. You have a great story to tell. And so we're going to give you the opportunity to tell it tonight.
Yes.
But before we get started, just remember everybody out there, please like, please subscribe, please share with your friends, family, and enemies, whomever, send it out. We're trying to grow the podcast. Also want to appreciate our sponsors, Chile Sunglasses. You'll see the link on the website. And also our studio, Echo Flow. Feel free to reach out via underratedpodcast@gmail.com if you want to get some studio time. They'll open it up for all kinds of things, so we appreciate their business. And again, I'm going to tease it a little bit. We got a new sponsor coming on in a couple of weeks. You'll hear all about it. Great company. We're looking forward to it. So with that, we'll dive right in with Marcus. So Marcus, just give us a little bit of an introduction about who you are, where you came from, what you're doing, and then we'll get into the more details.
Give us the story.
Yeah, I mean, man, I come from a myriad of places. So I grew up in Trenton and I grew up in Connecticut. I spent some significant time in Connecticut. So I was a bit of a transient. My grandparents lived right behind the Yale New Haven golf course in a small community called Westville. And then my mother, she lived in East Trenton and North Trenton. And we kind of would some years spend with my mother, and then some years my siblings and I would spend it with my grandparents. So, I had a very fruitful upbringing from that regard. I guess while I'm staring at the basketball, I'd be remiss to not just give my introduction to basketball. And I think I was like 4 or 5 years old when I first touched the basketball, and I've been in love with this thing for the next umpteen years, I'll just say. And it's a very cool thing because I think when I look at my experience and my story with basketball, I think it really speaks to the volume of how basketball, the game, can matriculate you in so many different ways just from playing it. And I know this gentleman to my left from basketball, and because of that nexus, I know you, and we're sitting here. But basketball was a conduit to all of that. So that's kind of the short story in a nutshell of where I'm from. I think I ventured out to a lot of other places, but that's my core. Yeah.
All right.
When did you start? You said you started when you was 4 years old. So when was the first time you started playing like organized ball or started, really taking the game serious?
Yeah. I think I was playing at a YMCA league when I was like 9. My grandfather signed me up for it. It was the Hamden YMCA, which is no longer. And I only know that because my aunt now lives around the corner from it. And I drive by like having these nostalgic moments. Like that was the first time I played. I had a woman coach who was a volunteer who played ball at Southern Connecticut. And she was like my volunteer coach. And that was the first league I was ever in. I remember it vividly because like we would always win a game and then lose a game and then win a game and lose a game. So my grandfather always used to be like, I guess y'all are going to win today because you lost last week. Like it literally went like that for the whole season. So yeah, that was my first experience and man, I loved it. We had a banquet. I still remember my first banquet. I got a little trophy, got a little acknowledgement, for participating and doing well. So yeah, that was my first experience organized.
So when we talked to Cape, so Cape was the original guest of our first ever podcast, UndeRAYted. Got a great story about him scoring hitting those foul shots against Kentucky.
Yeah.
But Cape talked about a interesting story about how he chose his college of St. Bonaventure. We're not going to get into it because some of the feedback that we've got, there's some restraining orders, some lawsuits that we don't want to.
We're not going to go down that road.
But talk about, you ended up going to Fairleigh Dickinson. And we'll get into recruiting because we always talk about on this podcast how recruiting has totally changed now. And you being in your current role, which we'll get into as well, navigating that landscape. But talk to us about, how you, where you went to high school and then what the recruiting process was for you.
Well, I'd be remiss not to mention like how my high school journey. I started out at Trenton and I was like the 15th man on the freshman team. Like literally, like the 15th man, like my freshman coach could not stand the way that I played defense, which is like now if you ask anybody, they'd say that's what, in my college career, that's what I probably did best. But I was the 15th man and I had a good friend who was, he unselfishly put me on a train one day, took me up to this gym in New Brunswick called St. Peter's High School, which is no longer, again, right? That might be I hope that doesn't turn into a theme today. Went to St. Peter's and we were playing for the CJ Jammers. And at the CJ Jammers, I was noticed by a high school coach at St. Peter's High School named Bob Green. And all I knew at St. Peter's was I knew two names. I knew that there was a guy that played there named Dave Capers, and there was another guy named Mars Mellish, and obviously there was also Tony Lee, who I'm sure you know very well as well. So 3 guys, right? Those were the 3 names that, like, if you were in my town in Trenton, you heard those 3 names.
Yes.
So, I was kind of surprised that the high school coach was recruiting me heavily, and I remember, like, overhearing him and somebody saying, hey, he didn't play at all. He was like the 15th man. And my high school coach was like, he's going to start for me. I don't know what's going on. And so, I wound up playing the next 2 seasons at St. Peter's High School. And, at that time, my game really took off. I really, really started to understand, playing the point guard position, what it was like to work, it was more organized. I got more personal attention because it was a smaller environment, and it was just a real healthy environment in general to be at that school. But my summers, when we lead into like my high school, my summers were just phenomenal. At some point, Dave will tell you about his one-on-one battles with Mars Mellish. But Mars was like a big brother to me as well. And Mars at the time had signed to go to Manhattan College. So he was up in Manhattan College, and here he was letting this young teenage kid just hang out at his dorm room.
Right.
And I got to see him work out, and I got to see kind of what it was like to be a Division I player. And then when he would come back, like the competitiveness would it would just be off. It would just be insane, like from morning to night. And it would start again the next day. And, from there, I got better, and I kept getting better, and I hung around those guys. And then, fortunately enough, I was able to be recruited. Fun fact, I did not play as a senior. So, I mean, I always tell people, like, I still got, a Division I scholarship, and I didn't play as a senior. I went home my senior year. My sister had just had a newborn baby, and I wanted to help. So I left St. Peter's my senior year, and I went to Trenton, and I just took classes. So I didn't play as a senior. And then I kind of regrouped and entered the field in the spring, and then I got scholarships in the spring of my senior year. Sidebar, because I went to Trenton, I was a senior, and I took like 4 or 5 classes, and I was able to get out of school at like 12:30.
Okay.
Now, there's a reason I'm telling you this. In the year 2000, the NCAA tournament was playing at like 1:00, and it was this guy's game. So I literally took off from school, and I was sitting on my couch watching the game live.
Wow.
And at that time I was so nervous because I don't know if you remember, like you didn't have True TV.
Right,
You didn't have all of that. So you didn't know if you were going to get the game. And when I saw I was getting Bonnie's Kentucky, first of all, man, I was enjoying. I'm like, yo, I know him, yo. You better do your thing, and then going through the nerves of watching the 3 timeouts. So, seeing that on the podcast was pretty cool too, because I lived that moment as well.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's crazy. I never knew that. I never knew you didn't play your senior year, and that you was on the college watching that game.
Yeah. For sure.
Cool.
Well, it's funny because you mentioned Bob Green, right?
Yeah.
And that was the one that hooked us up with Faith, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And now that you guys are saying that, I just remember being in Tony Lee's apartment with Bob Green.
Really?
You just said that. I was like, oh, that's it. So when we were recruiting Tony, and I was just like, oh my gosh. So now the name, I was like, I know that name. And now full circle. So Faith, you, Capers, whoa. Impacted by Coach Bob Green.
Absolutely.
Bob Green.
Yeah.
So growing up, like, you guys play a lot as youngsters, or just?
Oh yeah. I mean, whether it was like, Bugalo Park, what was the park out in Edison? Menlo Park. We'd be at, St. Peter's. They'd open the gym. A gentleman named Sal, rest in peace, Sal. Man, great guy. Used to just open the gym for us and just let us go at it. On Saturday and Sunday mornings. And then, wherever else we could get to. And then my freshman year of college, I always say this was like one of the coolest things. My freshman year of college, man, me, myself, Dave, and Mars were on the same team for the Jersey Shore League.
Okay.
And that was like really cool because I had Dave on one wing, Mars, and at that time it was just like clear out basketball. Remember, it was like just move. Right. So it was, getting to see those two kind of go to work and get the ball up to them. So yeah, I mean, we played all the time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So was there anybody else outside of Fairleigh Dickinson recruiting you, or how did you make that decision?
So early in September, before my senior year, September, I was playing in a lot of fall AAU. Like there was a live period, what they call it now. So we were in two big tournaments, and at that time I was playing with my AAU coach. At that time I was playing for Kids Plus, which was run by a guy named Larry Marshall. and we played in Connecticut select tournament, and we played in the Gauchos. And I played really well in both of those. I think I was like all tournament team for the Gauchos fall league tournament. So I had some interest. Quinnipiac was looking at me pretty heavy, and they had just kind of gone into D1 at that time. And then there was Niagara was looking not as serious as I wanted it to be, but it was good. But other than that, I mean, there was just a lot of Division twos.
Right.
And then what wound up happening, which was always a big decision for me, was I had a junior college come knocking at my door pretty much in like the beginning of the spring. And that was Hutchinson.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember taking the visit out there, and I was like, man, like at the time, Hutchinson was like number one JUCO, and that's where they were holding the tournament. And I know a lot of people wanted me to go there, but like I just couldn't go to Kansas. So I just couldn't. It was one of those things. I couldn't go to Kansas, and I had an opportunity to go to a 4-year school.
Well, not only that, but at Hutch, I mean, it's the school and really nothing else.
Exactly. Yeah. School. Yeah. I think they would have been better off with me if I hadn't taken the visit.
Right.
And they just sold me on the fact of what it was, and maybe I just showed up first day for school, and I'm like, all right, I'm here. But once I visited, and then I was able to visit other schools, I was just like, yeah. I don't worry, can do this, Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So tell us a little bit about your career at Fairleigh Dickinson.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because I got off to a slow start. Like I said, I didn't play as a senior, and one of the reasons that I was able to really get focused was, I was borderline not going to qualify. I tended to not be too focused in school, like I needed to be. And so I needed a certain, mark my senior year to qualify for the NCAA. So when I went to Trenton, I went back from my senior year. I remember I was sitting down with Bob Green and with Larry Marshall, and they were like, you're probably going to have to go to junior college. And I'm like, nah, just tell me what I need. And they were like, Marcus, like, you got to get straight A's, like across the board to qualify. And I was like, I'll do it. And they were kind of like looking at me like, dude, we've been looking at your report card for the last 2-3 years. Well, I did it. So when I did it, and at the time they gave you like number grades, and my numbers were like 98, 97, like, and it just triggered the NCAA. Like, what the heck's going on here? And that's when they would, they could mess with
right,
you. Yeah. I lost the whole first half of my freshman season because I was under investigation and under, compliance was just trying to get me through. Finally, I got eligible like the last day of December.
Okay.
And I played my first game the next night against Villanova. Our starting point guard was hurt, had like a sprained wrist. I played 36 minutes. And the cool thing about that is it was a televised game.
Right.
It was on ESPN Plus, and you just see how out of shape I was because I wasn't allowed to practice or do anything. And my coach was like, literally in that game, he's calling timeouts so that I could rest, like in the middle of the game. And it was a close game until about like the 6 or 7 minute mark. But that was my first game, and then point guard came back. He was a senior. I didn't play too much for the rest of the season. But then the next 3 years, I mean, I played enough basketball to last a lifetime. I never came out of the game my sophomore, my junior, and my senior year.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Who was on that Villanova squad?
They had Jermaine Medley.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember him.
Mhm.
They had, what was the two guard's name? He was shooter, Buchanan. His last name was, it might have been Ray. I don't know what his first name was, Buchanan. They had Sean Bradley was the big guy in the middle. He was pretty good. And at the time, that's Steve Lapis was coaching that too. I don't remember really who else. They had I think it was like Aaron Matthews. He was like their power forward. He's lefty. He's a good player. And then there was one guy I did remember because I played against him in high school, Andrew Sullivan. And he played at St. Augustine. We always had a thing with St. Augustine in the state tournament. So those are the guys primarily that I remember from that team, from that Nova team.
Your time at Fairleigh Dickinson, do you still keep in contact with any of those guys?
Oh man, of course. You know, Mensa Peterson,
Oh yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
Mensa was my best friend, and I was best man at his wedding. Godfather to his 3 kids. Like, we still talk, and now his son is climbing the charts playing basketball and
Mm.
finding joy and loving it. So it's, you know, it's cool. I mean, again, another, you know, relationship
Right.
as a result of basketball. So yeah.
What was your, do you have any memorable moments, any memorable games in your, obviously you played a lot. I mean, you look at your stats.
Yeah.
I mean, you literally averaged like 38, 39 minutes a game from your sophomore year to your senior.
Yeah,
So you never came out.
took a nice toll on my body too. You know, we didn't have all of the stuff they have today.
You can't complain about playing time though.
Yeah, no, I did. I think, you know, I went back to I did an NEC media day like 3 years ago. I want to say they called me in to do a media day, and they were asking me about my best moment, and I was honest, but the guy was like, "That wasn't." But I was really asking you, because where my moment was is my senior year. We came up short in like the semifinals. A guy hit like a half court shot. I'm not gonna say his name because I don't want to give him that kind of credit. But he hit like a half court shot, and we just lost our way. We lost the game. We should have won that game. We should have won that year. And I remember going into the locker room, and I was like the only senior on that team, myself and another guy, Brandon Edwards. And I remember like the guys felt terrible because they knew, like, you know, it kind of felt like they had let me down. I was just like, yo, if you guys learn from this and come back and win it, I'm gonna be fine.
Right.
I just, you know, that's life, right? You know what I mean? You learn from what you know, from the experiences. And they did. And Mensa hit the game-winning shot to send us to the NCAA tournament, and that was like a huge apex moment. So I mentioned that as like my feeling, even though I technically wasn't, you know, playing for FDU anymore. You know, I still was going back and supporting it. But if I was to think today, if I had to answer that question more specifically, I would say it was probably, you know, a night where we were playing Quinnipiac, and Quinnipiac had recruited me, and then they stopped, and then they started again, and then they stopped, and I would have probably gone there, because they were right up the street from my grandparents.
Yeah.
So I knew my grandparents really would have enjoyed seeing me play in Connecticut, but they didn't. So, like, you know, I never wanted to lose to them.
Right.
But my junior year, I was really I started dealing with a lot of injuries. I had like a back issue going on, I had an ankle injury going on, and my coach would just say, "Listen, Marcus, you at whatever percent is putting us in a better chance to win than not. Can you go?"
Yeah.
And I remember that night, like I was in pregame, and I was like, I feel good. And I went up to Coach. I played for another Coach Green, Tom Green. I said, "Coach, I feel good tonight. It's gonna be on." And he kind of just like looked at me, like he was like, "Whatever. Like, are you gonna play or not? Like, you always make me nervous." I was like, it's the best I felt in like a couple of months. And you know, I went out that night. I think I career high, 28, 9 assists, like, you know, 5 rebounds, something like that. And that was my signature, probably my signature game. It was against Quinnipiac.
Right.
That was a pretty cool moment. Seeing my roommate, and I know I'm going a little deeper than what you asked, but seeing my roommate score, my roommate, the late great James Felton, scored 50 points.
Wow.
That was cool to be part of.
Right.
In a college game, like James had 50. And I was like, the whole time, like I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
I mean, the assists you had.
Man, you know what? That's a great question. I'm sure I had a lot, you know, because I used to always be the one to feed him the ball. We used to have like the eye signals. He was my roommate too. We used to have like eye signals the whole nine, and James was so freaking good, man. And you know, that was a cool moment. Like, I've never played with anybody that's gotten 50.
Right.
So, you know, and he got 50 like the real way, because he wasn't shooting threes. Like, it was all twos and free throws,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, those moments stick out. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Those are great experiences. Just living that life.
I thought it might have been the time that I was playing in the exhibition game like this.
You know what? I really was wondering if he was going to break that up. You know, in my mind, I'm like, does he remember that? I wonder if he does, but why would I not think that he remembers that? Like, I knew he was going to bring that up. Has he told you about this?
You know, he has, but on this podcast, we tend to bring up stuff.
I mean, so it's funny because we had spent the whole summer together. Like, I think at that time, he was coming up to FDU to even work out. Like, he knew my teammates and everything. And so we were getting ready to play an exhibition game. And at that time, that's when these exhibition teams used to, like, stack their teams with, like, all the former players. And, you know, it was going to be a game when you played the exhibition game, especially your first one when you're still learning the plays.
Right.
So it's about, like, 3 hours before the game. And he texted me and was like, yo, I'm going to see you tonight. And I'm like, what? So he comes in with his bag, and I'm like, oh, he's playing tonight. And, you know, he caught a little dunk on our big guy. You know what I mean? It was I still remember that. I know that was what was coming next. Yeah, he dunked on our center. He caught him baseline. And I think we lost by like 2 or 3 or something like that. So it was just how you just seen him left play. It was just like all the icing on the cake. And here was the real reality. I took him home after the game.
He's like, yo, can you ride?
Because he was right over the bridge. After he was there, he rolled. I took him home after the game.
So you dunked the boy.
You weird. I had to let her know.
Like, man.
Because something happened. I think the big man was talking something, or the bench was talking to me. And I said, I'm about to dunk. Yeah, right. Baseline, boom. And I went up to the bench. I told you. And Marcus was like, why'd you let him do that?
I knew I would never hear the end of it.
And it's 20-something. What is that, 2000?
That's like 2002, 2000, something like that. And I knew it. I was like, man, I'll never be able to live this
They
day.
can't erase what we was, nutso.
Man.
That's funny. You know, if you want to tell about the up and under that I hit him with.
Oh, man, I think we need to. Please do. Please do. He good for every bill. I'm glad you noticed that.
Well, it was funny because I was talking a lot of trash, and I knew that next time he was guarding me,
You set me up.
I knew he wanted to block my pads so bad, so I did the up, beef little under, and then I kept saying mouse in the house.
Hey, you're running out court like, oh, this guy.
So it does come around. I know karma does come about.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about you know, you talked about your high school career.
Yeah.
Even growing up, bouncing back and forth between New Jersey and Connecticut,
Yeah.
and you know, you senior year not playing in high school, and in college you start off with first not being eligible right away while it's being investigated. You're dealing with a lot of these issues, and as you guys played at, you know, big time level, you know, and you playing a lot of minutes, you know, you're grinding it out. How did basketball? You talked about how it's created relationships for you, but how did like those experiences like help you get ready for what you're doing today?
Oh, I mean, it's a microcosm for whatever you are as a person and whatever you're going to be. You know, if you play this game and it's kind of a microcosm. And I think for me, I've always been able to live my life in positivity. But I'm always very critical of myself. I give myself a very sharp critical analysis, the same way I did when I was a player. When I was a sophomore, you know, we had the worst season ever. We were 4-22, and we had other issues going on that is for another podcast someday. But we had other issues going on. But like, man, I mean, I remember going back that year, and I take this with me, and I say this because this is important because I do this for my clients now. That summer, I looked at all of the scores, and I was like, man, we lost so many close games.
Right.
Like, because most times in college basketball, especially in conference play, and you can attest, you guys can all attest to this, these games come down to like 3 or 4 possessions, right?
Yep.
Like, it's in theory, it's great to be like, yo, we're going to blow them out tonight. But like, how often does that really happen? Right. These games come down to 3 or 4 possessions. Who can really lock in, you know, focus and execute? right? What's being demanded. And then there's a little bit of playing above the X's and O's. But when I looked at all of the box scores and I saw how close we were, and I was watching the tape, there was one thing that kept jumping out to me. And I was having some terrible turnovers in like the last 5 minutes of the game. And I think if you really want to be better as a player, and I say microcosm, better as a person,
Right.
you got to be able to be very honest about where you're at and where you want to get to. And that summer, I mean, I remember guys coming by my dorm room and being like, yo, Whit, man, you keep staring at the same plays every time I'm coming, because I literally sat there and instead of celebrating my pull-up three,
Right.
and instead of celebrating my floater in the lane, you know, I wanted to watch where I went wrong. I wanted to watch where I turned it over, like where we needed a bucket and I may have tried to do something that I shouldn't, or went to the wrong spot on the floor. And I came back the next year. The next 2 years, you know, I led the conference in assist to turnover ratio by far. I never turned the basketball over because I was that adamant about, you know, or that I was that obedient about improving.
Right.
And I think I took that in life, right? Whenever I enter a situation, you know, I'm always looking at, like, all right, how can I improve here?
Right.
I got this. I'm not, you know, don't be overwhelmed. You know, don't be down on yourself because it's something new. But all right, let's take a look at it. How can we improve? So I think that, you know, that lesson from basketball stayed with me for the rest of my life. And then, you know, not to mention, I mean, I was a 5'9" point guard. I got a chip on my shoulder everywhere I go. So I'm always going to be working my tail off. Like, it's never going to be that somebody outworks me.
Right.
So I've taken that into my profession. And I've tried to share that, you know, with clients or people that I encounter, you know what I mean?
Yeah. That's good. And we all talk about just the adversity that comes with playing sports.
Yeah.
And you know, our generation, yes, I'm a little older, but our generation, you know, we're always taught, like, fight through everything. And then Cash had brought up, you know, when he was here on the podcast, that, you know, as athletes, we're all about, like, basketball, and that defines us.
Yeah.
And then when you can't play anymore competitively or whatever, like, then you start having to really search for, like, who you are.
Right.
You still like take all of the stuff you learned, but you're still trying to find out now, what am I going to be outside of basketball?
Right.
And I guess, you know, we always ask this question, like, when you finished your career at Fairleigh Dickinson, like, when did you realize, like, okay, it's done, now I got to shift gears and figure out next chapter of my life?
Man, I'd be sitting here lying if I told you that was easy, because it wasn't. I think, you know, I think I was grounded. I think my faith is something important to me, and I think every athlete, no matter what sport, what you do, when it's over, there is a period. There's like a mourning period. There is a period of, like, you're just kind of in exile in your mind and in kind of where you're at in terms of, like, all right, how do I want to do this next chapter? Because this next chapter is going to be a lot longer probably than the chapter I just had in terms of being an athlete. I think when I first realized, like, all right, I'm not going to do this, I think I tried to, like, say, all right, I'm not going to be around the game.
Right.
And I think that was just, like, foolish. So I remember, like, the first 2 jobs I took were, like, I thought I was like, all right, I'm going to go corporate and, like, basketball's done. Like, I don't want to talk about it.
Right.
I don't want to, you know, I'll do something else. Maybe I'll take up, you know, I was always a good swimmer. I'll just swim in my leisure activity, you know, do something like that. And that lasted for about a year, maybe.
Right.
And then, you know, basketball has its way of finding you. And I remember one day I was just, you know, I always think of the 2 times where I was in places I'd never been before. And my ability or my joy of just walking in the gym.
Yeah.
And I was in Frederick, Maryland, and I was staying with my uncle at the time, and I was working for Verizon. And I remember, like, I just got to go to a gym. And I remember walking in Frederick County Community College, and I literally did this in repeat a couple of years later. I just walked up to the coach, and I was like, I'm Marcus Whitaker. Can I volunteer?
Right.
And he's like, what? Like, why? And from there, I remember that I, like, kind of trained that was my first time training somebody outside of college. What I never tell people is like, I actually used to train some of my teammates when I was at FDU. So I was always kind of doing it. I didn't know that I was going to turn that into a profession. And, I turned it into a profession before it. Now it's like, it's like a boom.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing it. You can find it at every corner just about. But yeah, that was kind of how I transitioned. But yes, it was a struggle and I didn't know until like it kind of just happened,
How was your, I know because you played overseas, but how was that for you when you kind of realized, man, this is it? I mean, other than the exhibitions and all the other stuff you torment people with still.
I kind of figured it was over when I tore my ACL at Kingdom. I was playing against Joakim Noah, and I tore it, and it was like right before I had just got back from like Germany, so I was still in the mode of playing, but I was kind of like in that between age. I was like 30 something, and then I had a lot of friends that were in finance, like one of my guys, Shane McNeil, and he was like, how long are you gonna be able to play for, like competitively and make money? So. He was like, you should study and get your Series 7. So while I was over in Europe, I was actually studying to gear myself up for the real world or whatever. And even still, after I stopped, it was hard, like just finding your way, right? Because you, as a ball player, you tend to have things handed to you a lot. And yeah, you work for the stuff that you don't have, but because of your talents, people want to help you a lot, right? So as long as you show that, you want to be helped and you want to learn, people are willing to give you a helping hand. And that helped me because a lot of my, like even Coach Green, even like Larry Marshall, even guys from college, like everybody was trying to, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? So I had my hands in a lot of different hats until I found something that stuck with me, which is selling. I had a joy of making money and being able to help people with products and everything. So it kind of just stuck with me, just having that personality to go into the sales workforce. But like he said, like basketball has matriculated into everything in my life because I think about stuff that when it gets too hard, I think about all the stuff that I did in basketball that was so harder that I'm like, I can't let this beat me. Like I done did this and that, gone up against the odds and beaten those odds. So how can I let this beat me? So it was hard, but definitely something that I overcame, and even still till this day, I have a job, but I'm still kind of searching for my purpose because I still want to do something with ball, right? But it's not as lucrative as having a real job per se. So, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to stick around the game as much as possible, right?
For sure.
Hence, I'm trying to coach that Cardinal Spellman and and the competitive spirit against trying to beat you guys, and it's just.
So it's a good point. So you mentioned you were working with Verizon.
Yeah.
What made you decide, like, hey, I'm going to go back. I'm going to, be this, professional trainer, but I'm also going to go to law school. I'm going to become a sports agent. Like, I mean, there's so many things that just you've accomplished in such a short period of time.
Yeah, right.
Like, were you just like, how'd you make these decisions?
I mean, I would love to sit here and say I was a genius and I had all of the foresight in the world. Like, oh man, I had the crystal ball.
Right.
These things, I just think they happen because I think I've been fortunate to be in good environments. I think I've seen great leadership. Like, I'm not gonna, obviously this guy's on a high. He's remembering his dunk and all of that good stuff. But truth be told, like, Dave was our pioneer. And I think, always being able to kind of see the example that he was setting, that Mars was setting, these guys, it kind of like was like, all right, man, you got to get it together.
Right.
We'll still bump heads when we get out on that court, but, you kind of got to get it together. And, the way that training came is really like a surreal story. I mean, I came back from Maryland and I was still kind of like searching. I mean, I still didn't really know. I think at the time I was like just substitute teaching and I was just trying to figure something out. And Larry Marshall's son, who's also one of my brothers, his good friend, Neil Marshall, was bothering me for like 2 months to come train some kids. And I remember at that time I was in like one of those bitter modes and I was like, man, I don't want to train no kids, man. Like, I ain't coming up there to train kids. And he was training kids. It's like far out, remote town in the suburbs somewhere. He was like, man, I think you'd really be good at it. Think you should come up. And like he would call, and I'd be like, man, I'm not going. Stop calling me, bro.
Right.
And finally, one day, I had nothing to do, and I was like, all right, man, I'll take the ride. I remember complaining to him. We were driving, like, man, this is so far. And I remember I got into that gym, and it was like a little fourth grade team. And I started, they literally just dropped me off. They were like, that's your team down there. They're waiting for you. You can go. And I went down there and we started doing a couple of drills, and like these kids' eyes were like saucers. And I was like, Marcus, you got to show up for them.
Right.
And then that's when I had a breakthrough where it was like, I realized like, it's not about me.
Right. Yeah.
It's not about me anymore. It's about what I can give back.
Yeah. Wow. It's powerful.
And from there on, that's where training became a staple in my life. I mean, I think I wound up doing it for like the next I wound up doing it for like the next 8 years.
Right.
And I wound up, going to, doing the teaching thing. And, I was set to get my master's in education. I always knew law was I have 3 lawyers in my immediate family.
Okay.
So there was a little bit of rebelliousness. Because I used to hate getting prosecuted by them. So I always thought, being a lawyer is corny. And, it's like, man, I don't want to be like that, questioning. I do it now. But my good friend, I have a good friend that I was playing in a basketball league with. We were playing in a YMCA league. And my good friend, Bobby, and he was a professional football player. And he had become an attorney. And that was the first time like I really like vibed and connected with an attorney. And I remember him sitting in my house and was like, man, what are you waiting for, man? Go ahead to law school.
Right.
And I was still debating it. And then one day long story, I got injured. My hand got injured. I'm in a hospital room, and the doctor who's operating on my hand is just asking me, and he's like, what do you do? And he's like, he's asking me, he's like, can I bring my son to you to train?
Right.
And he's like, by the way, man, he was like, I don't know why you're still teaching. And I was like, well, I'm a teacher. I like to teach. He was like, you're teaching every day in the gym.
Right.
He said, go to law school. And I was like, yeah, all right. So from there, I went to law school. So yeah, I mean, in law school, you're in there, and I'd always kind of fooled around in school. You can't fool around in law school. I tell, if somebody's figured out how to fool around in law school and be great, I mean, God bless them. That was the first time in my life where it was like, there is literally no way around this.
Right.
So, you work really hard, you take the same, principles, and I remember leaning on some of my mentors for that. And yeah, that was kind of how that happened. Yeah.
So what kind of law did you go into, and then how did you become an agent?
I went in. So when you go in, it's, you don't know, right? It's all general. The first year of law school, everybody does the same thing. And so around the world, like whether you're at Harvard or whether you're at, whatever university, you guys are all pretty much doing the same thing. Where I think, I kind of found my way was you're taking classes the second and third year, and you kind of know. Now, I went to school while a little older. I was dating myself again here. I was 31 when I started law school. So I kind of had an idea that I wanted to use my law degree to help athletes.
Right.
I knew that, and I had trademarked something. I have a company called GroundUp Basketball, and I trademarked this logo. And man, was that expensive.
Right.
And I remember saying to myself, like, man, these guys, you can charge this much to do this. And it was really complicated. Like,
right.
I'm glad I didn't try to do it on my own.
Right.
And I knew that I wanted to do something with that because I was very interested in intellectual property.
Yep.
I liked the creative side of, it's like you guys are creating something right now. There's intellectual property all around this right now.
All right, yeah.
So I was always like intrigued by that. So I knew I would go into that, and I wound up doing the concentration in that. But you know, you don't really know how it's gonna fade because you need a job, you need certain, and I mean, I think that's where I was fortunate. I think being hired right out of law school allowed me to kind of go and do the way that I was hired, or the field that I was hired in. I didn't have to say, okay, you know what, man, I'm just gonna go do, bankruptcy law, or I'm gonna go do, something else because I got to get a gig, out of law school. I was able to kind of take my time.
Right.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So as far as being a lawyer, like, what do you do for players right now?
Well, it's fluid. So I think I'd like to say I'm doing a lot of contracts, a lot of advising. Every player is their own brand. That's just a fact. How do you optimize this opportunity that you have for this short period of time that you're going to be, kind of in power, so to speak. So there's a lot of that, but other things come up, things that I can't talk about on there, right? Yeah. But other things come up all the time, and you just want to be there. You just really want to be, kind of a fiduciary. You want to be somebody that can provide good counsel, not just to them, but to their families. Right. So yeah, that's where we've kind of fallen into place.
And I won't mention the names because I don't know if I'm allowed to, nor do I need a loss. But I remember like one of your clients came and played ball with us, and then ended up like somebody told him,
Penis finger.
2 weeks before.
I had to. That's a nice phone call to the team. By the way, he's gonna be a little restricted right now. Man, and I mean, we'd be remiss. I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't mention Scotty. Scotty,
and a great guy.
Scotty.
And I didn't foul him. Yes, we sure about that? He was on my team.
Yeah, I mean, Scotty, that was like, Scotty was like my litmus test of like, all right, are you really ready to do this? I think unbeknownst to both of us, when Scotty was the guy who hired me out of law school, I think unbeknownst to both of us, like, we really didn't realize what we were stepping into.
Right.
And, his first job was in Croatia. And, I remember like 3 months in, like we had a potential contract breach. I was like, man, like I got to put, I'm going to work. And the coolest thing about that is two things. Number one, Scotty was somebody who I met when he was 16 years old,
right?
Coming up to train. And because of our relationship through the court, just training and just building that, he had enough trust, to be like, man, like, all right, if Whit says he can do this, like, I can just know that he's going to do it.
Right.
So, the coolest thing about, and I got to tell the story about basketball, because when we were in Croatia, going through whatever we were going through, I had a teammate there from FDU.
Oh, wow.
Like, it's the craziest thing ever.
Which one?
His name was Davor Filipovic.
Okay.
And Davor is now, he's a big time professor, and I think he's doing something in economic finance for his country. But when I went over there, Mensa kept telling me, my best friend Mensa kept saying, "Yo, man, you should hit Davor up." But I was like, kind of, I don't know, I was reluctant because I didn't know like where he was at in life, and like, I hadn't spoke to him since FDU. Is 2016. That's literally over 12 years. And like, I'm just going to be like, yo, man, I'm here. When I tell you, I sent him an email. He emailed me back within 3 minutes. He showed up where I was within 15 minutes.
Wow.
And for the next 6 months, I mean, Davor was the host with the most, man. He and that's a basketball relationship.
Sure.
And I know I'm like veering off on our topic. I apologize, but
you're bringing it all together.
But like, here I am, and he meets Scotty, and you know, we're like 12 years later, you know what I mean? And we're in his country now, right? So now he can really show me all the things he would brag about that I'd be like, shut up, you're in America, nobody wants to hear that. I remember, like, you know, I was so immature, he would try to, like, explain to me things, you know, culturally, in his country, and I was just so immature. I'd be like, man, DeVar, nobody, we're going to the Cedar Hill Grill, man. You don't want to hear about your food, you know, and here I am in this country, and he's showing me all of this. Right? And that, I think, ultimately, the coolest thing about basketball to me, is like it really meets at the intersection of like cross-cultural and cross-generational relationships. Like you can literally be with somebody completely older, younger, somebody from a completely different walk of life, and you can find, you know, commonality and comfort, just from the fact that you play. So I'm over in Croatia, and we're hanging out with DeVar while we're over there. And Scotty's like, how do you know this? I'm like, he played with me in college. Like, you know, so to get back to Scotty, I mean, Scotty hired me, you know, right out of there. And, you know, from that point on, like, you know, Scotty was my primary job, you know, was making sure that, you know, number one, he was always in really good situations, that he felt comfortable about where his career was going and where it was. And then also, you know, helping him, you know, navigate the standards of what quality of life is, right? Because I think that's important for athletes too, is to kind of know what quality of life is about. And I always tried to make sure that, like, whatever, you know, I didn't make it a situation where I just did things and he didn't know what was going on. And it, you know, it has to be educational for everybody. And then you learn, like, you know, the same way in basketball, you know, you're going to make a mistake. Right. Some mistakes going to happen. You know, you're not, what are you going to do? You know, you got to kind of, you know, rectify it. But you still got to get to the next play. Funny story, and he'll laugh if he ever hears it. And it's okay to tell it. You know, we were negotiating a contract, and like at this point, we were like 4 or 5 years in, and I thought I knew everything. Like, no team, when this comes, they're gonna know who they're dealing with, right? You know, and here I am, you know, I'm looking at everything. We get out there, you know, and we fly out to this place, and that was our deal. I'd always go out there with him. Initially, like I showed up with him, and then I would stay for maybe a month or so, and then I'd come back home, and then I would go back out. So I go back out, and like when I was leaving, they were in winter. It was like just getting ready to hit summer, and I remember going to the team and saying, "Hey, man, we need more heaters in here. Like, it's a little cold, right? You know, what's going on?" And there I was kind of like looking, and I'm like, I went back and I looked at the contract. I'm like, this is supposed to be here. Like, what are you guys doing? What's up? And they're like, we're so sorry, you know, blah, blah, blah. So I come back, and Scotty's got, like, you know, eczema all on his neck. I'm like, you know, I'm mad. Like, he's all right, but I'm mad. I'm like, why you got all that stuff on you? What's going on with your neck? He's like, what, man? It's hot. The weather's changed and whatever. So I'm like, I didn't look at it. I didn't specifically state that this place needed central air, and I just missed it. You know what I mean? Like I missed that. You know, I didn't think to look for that, right? But you learn, you know. And I remember going in. They were trying to re-sign him to the team, and like I remember, I had all the leverage. I was like, "Yeah, what kind of place y'all talking about for next year?" They're like, it will have central air, will have everything. And I'm like, yeah, you know, but I say that to say, like, there's always going to be a learning curve. There's always going to be something you learn. I mean, it wasn't fatal, you know, it went away. Right. But at the same time, you know, you learn and you show him that, you know, I'm not perfect. I'm still learning too. Right. I think that's what it's supposed to be about. You know? Yeah.
That's great. That's great that you had a good relationship with him. Like,
yeah. I mean, we were two peas in a pod, man. We wound up seeing a bunch of countries. And he played well. And I was really happy for him that he has that in his memory bank. He has that on his resume that, you know, he played well. You know, obviously we had lofty, I wouldn't say lofty. We had expectations of, you always set your expectations high.
Yeah.
And I would have liked to see him, be a mainstay on an NBA team. He clearly was good enough, clearly was talented enough. But that's where we go into the business of this sometimes. It's not necessarily the best guy. When you talk about the NBA, it's just that's not, and it's saying that they're still the greatest league on earth, but sometimes that's kind of how it falls into place. But I think the coolest thing is when I think about, you don't know, but it's like when I look at now and the service that I'm able to provide. But I think it was last I checked, and it probably is still going up. 40% of the NBA is international.
Yeah.
And for me to have an opportunity along with Scotty I literally saw every international market that was worth seeing. We were in the ABA. I was just talking to a guy about that. I was in the ABA, which is the Adriatic Basketball Association, where Joker came from, and all those guys in Serbia, and we were in that league.
Right.
And I got to literally, live the experience. I got to see how they developed their youth. We were in the NBL in Australia and New Zealand. Same thing. Right. We were in, Israel. We were in, all of these different places, Turkey, and to see that from that perspective was, I think that experience is indelible, Yeah.
What was one of the best experience countries that you've been to?
I really liked, obviously, because Devor was in Croatia, that always is gonna ring a tone. But I mean, I think being in New Zealand and Australia,
Really?
yeah, that was kind of it still fascinates me that we were there, because it's like sometimes I get a glimpse of a map,
Right. Yeah.
and I'm like, man, we were all the way on the other side of the world,
Right.
like and it was like he was doing his thing, like he had the whole continent of New Zealand, like Scott, like, he's hitting game winners, he's doing what he's doing. And then, the next year he played in Australia, and he was with Melbourne, and he was able to get a championship there. And so, he cemented, kind of for his contributions to that league. And then, you go all the way over there, and guess who I run into? The famed announcer who was, rest in peace, left us, I want to say 2 years ago, Corey Homicide Williams.
Oh, yeah.
Is calling, literally calling the games. And I'm like, man, this is a guy I used to watch play in the park. I used to watch him play against you.
Word.
You know what I mean? So it's like, we're sitting there talking. He's like, oh, yeah, tell Capers I said what's up. But we're on the other side of the world, right? So, I mean, it's pretty, surreal kind of when you see that. Yeah.
So as we start to wrap things up here, two other segments here. First, being in the role that you're at, you may get a lot of phone calls, because anyone who comes on this podcast, their career just skyrockets. So you may get people calling you like, I want you to represent you. So Cape and I may want a piece of that action, but we'll talk about that. But the whole NIL portal now, and as you're taking on clients or whatever, or just looking at potential clients, how, what are you talking about? What are you advising? What are the conversations in your profession about the NIL, the portal, and how that's impacting college athletes today?
Pay your taxes.
Very good saying it.
Pay your taxes, because the IRS comes to the door. You just don't want that. So that's the first thing is, I pay your taxes. But I think it's really, it's more so, when this thing started, how it's evolving, and now it's pay to play. It really is. I know we want to say other things. I try to be very meticulous in terms of who I work with. I like to work with a good group that has, people around them that can continue to, augment this business that they now have.
Yeah.
And I think the most, the most important thing is getting them to understand, where I'm coming from in this. And I think the unfortunate part about what's the name, image, and likeness space with college athletes is if you compare that to, they're being paid like pros, they're being, kind of treated in that manner. But when you go to the table to negotiate, they're not collectively bargained for.
Right.
Right. So, as opposed to in the NBA, in the NFL, these leagues that we have in this country, there's certain things that just aren't going to happen because they're collectively bargained for. Now that comes with its own issues, of course. But I would be one to say, union is better than not.
Right.
So because of that, you have a lot of kids or young adults and their families, right? They've never been represented.
Right.
So how do you know what, the baseline as a lawyer is adequate representation, right?
Yeah.
How do you know what adequate representation is, much less good representation? And it doesn't have to be a lawyer, right? It could be a manager now. Anybody can get in this space, which is good. And, it's kind of a balancing act on that. So I think, really trying to get them to understand that, like, even if it's not me, right, these are the things you should look for from a representative. For somebody who's going to speak on your behalf, somebody who's going to serve you, because they work for you, and hopefully they see this as something where they can be working with you, and it can be an exchange of education. What I would encourage all student athletes and their families to do is, like, I think we get into a realm where we're kind of like, I got to get mines.
Right.
So let me do what I'm doing over here, but like whatever Dave's doing, like I ain't got nothing to do with that. I'm doing this. And I think if we share information, we change the market.
Yeah.
Right. So I think, I'm always encouraging families and, whenever they're like, oh, thank you so much. Well, thank you for what you've done, whatever. I'm like, just share information.
Right.
Just share the information of your experience, share the information of the market, share the information, because that allows everybody to hold, everybody to the fire, so to speak. So yeah, those are probably some of the most important.
That's excellent advice.
Yeah. What I would like to see is I think this is a great opportunity for student athletes or athletes. I know I'm using the word that people probably could be cringing at out there at this point, but I think that, there's a huge opportunity for, athletes to even cement themselves further in institutions. I think when you look at, the things that some of these institutions can do with research.
Right.
And I think, if some of these athletes start to form together, you got to pay taxes. There's probably a bit that you probably could write off and, create grants and become more staples in these institutions. I think that would be a cool thing to see. Yeah.
All right. That's excellent. So we're going to go into our last segment, which is sponsored by the Chili sunglasses, and you're going. You got mine. Thank you. So again, you'll see the website on there if you want to go out and purchase one. So this is the final segment, overrated, underrated. So we're just going to give you 5 things, and you just can either say overrated, underrated. If you want to explain it, you can explain it, because no one seems to be able to just say overrated or underrated without an explanation. So Capers, why don't you kick us off in this segment?
Mars Mellish.
Come on, you know Mars is underrated. Until I'm Gardner, you know what I mean?
That's about what it is.
Locking Mars up. You know what it is. He knows what it is too, but underrated. Mars is the first guy that I seen in person step over half court and shoot a 3. And like you had to get up on him. So I'm gonna give him his props, but you know what it is. Mars, you know what it is too.
WNBA.
I think it's underrated. I think for what that game's been able to expand to, you look at now they're having expansion teams and they're filling them with, it's the quality hasn't gone down with the expansion teams. Like I remember watching it when it was just like Cynthia Cooper and Cheryl Swoops. They were going to win it every year.
Right.
And no, not to knock their dynasty, but like the field wasn't, as deep as it is now. So I would say underrated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lawyers.
Underrated. Come on, man.
Because, like in today, like everything is, you have the ability to kind of do stuff on your own now, right? I mean, you can look stuff up. You got Chat GPT.
You want to get me started tonight? Come on, man. Don't take me down this road. That's a whole nother. That's it. You know? I mean, I think
Because what made me say that, right? Because I know you had represented somebody at one point, and you told them they was looking for an agent, and you told them, well, you should go take the test yourself.
Yeah.
And so, like, you kind of push yourself out of it. You shared information. So that's what I'm saying. Like, do you think your job, or I guess the whole lawyer, is it underrated or overrated? Because why would you tell somebody to go do it for themselves if you can, if it's not overrated?
Right.
That's how I'm looking at it.
All right. Well, all right. To your point there, I was telling them to go be a sports agent.
Yeah.
I wasn't telling them to go be a lawyer.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
So I think it's a sports agent doesn't have to be a lawyer.
Right.
And I think when you talk about, becoming a lawyer, like, and this is coming from somebody who really like freelanced for like the first 5 years,
Right.
to the chagrin of most of my colleagues, because they just were like, how are you getting to do this?
Right.
But I think when you think about what you have to go through and endure just to get a license, I mean, listen, I mean, I'll tell anybody like this, like, that bar exam is no joke. At minimum, you're sitting in there, you're 2 days, 6 hours a day, 3 hours per break, like no notes. You don't have an open book for that, right? And then you have to continue to do, as I'm doing even tomorrow, I'm going to be sitting and continuing legal education to continue to stay up to date. I think with the rules and all of that, like, there's some things that are going on with lawyers and your interaction that they'll probably never say, that you are probably getting ready to have them do something that's adverse, and they just figure out a way to not do it without even telling you. Like, you're messing with my ethical rules. So no, I would say for the profession, underrated.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So we had some controversy when AJ was here.
When is there not controversy with age?
I know, but we asked this question: trainers, overrated or underrated? And then he went on like a 45-minute,
Yeah, we thought
hate speech.
Yeah, we had a soft spot with that one.
I mean, I guess everybody deserves to make a living in this country. How can I just leave it at that? Everybody deserves.
I mean, that's kind of get him off the hook, though. You gotta say
You eat it underrated. I've never seen this speech so challenging.
I mean, I think I just think that's complicated. I think there's.
You can give your answer. What's the explanation?
I think
You got to choose one.
AJ was like, overrated, they all suck.
Yeah, I think now I think now it's very saturated. I think that what qualifies you to do it.
Right.
I think because that's kind of not a set rubric, it's become probably a bit overrated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kate, take us on with the last one.
Well,
Because I was gonna, but you get the last one this time because I was gonna say something else. But
Capers dunk, underrated. Is that why?
It's overrated. And I always do that. So Capers gets the last one.
This is his FDU dunk, underrated, overrated. Oh, no.
Let the ball go through it and rattle around.
Nah, it was in there. And he was a footer, too. The other tall ones.
That is crazy.
Let's go with New Jersey basketball.
Always underrated.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, what are we saying in totality over the years, or are we saying like today?
I would say over the years.
Oh, clearly underrated. Yeah.
Did both you guys play with for Ed Butler or in those?
Yeah, I was an Ed Butler guy.
Yeah, I never actually went to Ed Butler, but I a lot of our guys went there.
Yeah, he looked us up when we were recruiting Champlain. Like we would go to the store, and if he would be like, you don't worry about this guy, you're more to this guy, because he's the one that got us with Tony Lee.
Oh, really? What was it? EKB, right? EKB.
He'd have his pamphlets out there, and he'd give it to me all highlighted, like, Hunter, just look at these guys, and I was like, all right, cool, thanks, my job's done.
I think I got recruited from there from Bonaventure because Lanier came to one, and I had a really good showing at his camp. I was like one of the top 5 guys at the camp, and he was like the Capers for Bonaventure. And then after that, Lanier started recruiting me, and he came to my house actually that afternoon and was like, yeah, I like the way you play, you know. So yeah, Ed Butler was a good guy.
Yeah, no,
Word.
it was good. It's good. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was great,
Man,
And listen, you know, I just want to. It was Capers who found Scotty. Just breaking news.
Yeah, I've been, bro.
It all comes to light.
No, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. It wasn't me, but I felt bad because he comes to our run.
And then he was like this. He was like, yeah, I was supposed to go to skis like 2 weeks from now. And I was like,
yeah.
let me see my notes, buddy.
Hey, I got the call with what did you do? Because I told him not to go. You know, I'm sitting there telling him not to go, and he's itching. He's like, man, I gotta play, man. You gotta let me play. I'm like, all right, then. I don't want to put on any figure, but
well, listen, thank you. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Thanks again. Remember, like, share, subscribe, get it out there. We appreciate it. We'll see you next time on UndeRAYted. Thank you.